Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me today. Super excited for my guest that I have on. He's a freelance writer. I'm going to give him a chance, an opportunity to really talk about himself and share a little bit about what he's doing. But my good friend, Michael Venutolo-Mantovani, has joined me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, brother.
Beautiful pronunciation.
Thank you.
One slight miss, but 98 out of 100.
Hey, when you got a last name like that, what are you going to do, you know?
Venutolo-Mantovani. I know it's why I encouraged, and my father encouraged. It's why everyone encouraged my wife to keep her last name, which she very much did.
Awesome.
There's no reason to have this burden.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. Michael and I have, we're pretty new to this friendship that we have. We just kind of met. He had reached out to the show, and my team let me know that he was interested in coming on, and I found the things that he's doing very interesting in not only the writing, but he's a fairly new dad, and he's a musician and all that kind of stuff. But what I like about him is I like the approach he's taking with not only fatherhood, but also writing. And we're going to get into all that. But Michael, for my listeners who may not know who you are, can you share a little bit about your background, the things that you kind of did and where it's transitioned you today, and the things that you've gone through and what you're doing today?
Yeah. So thanks for having me. First of all, we threw this together pretty fast. I appreciate you doing this. But so I was born and raised on the Jersey Shore. Moved to New York, went to college in Philadelphia, moved to New York City, worked in the record industry for many years, made a living for a while playing in a band, with touring around the country, and was very emotionally equipped to be away from my wife, who was at the time my girlfriend, because she had only really known me and we'd only really dated as me being a guy who went away for long stretches of time for work to go on tour. But when we decided we knew we were going to have kids, that was not my idea of fatherhood. So I kind of hung the band up, and rather than get back into the record business, I had worked on the label side when we lived in New York. Just kind of needed a break from the biz, and just kind of started writing to make ends meet. I knew it was a skill I had. It was something I did in college a lot. It was my very first job out of college, was actually working for a newspaper, but then I transitioned into the record business. And knowing that I could do this, I could make a little bit of money to make ends meet until I could figure out what my next move was. And then things started kind of snowballing really fast. And within like almost no time at all, I was contributing to the New York Times, some really big Southern Living, really big newspapers, magazines, websites. I should add it in there. We left New York for a variety of reasons, but one of the big ones is that we didn't really want to raise kids in Lower Manhattan. No diss to people who do. You're much stronger and tougher than we are, but we wanted someplace a little more quiet, a little more laid back, which is how we ended up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. New York City is home. New York City is always going to be home, and my wife and I always joke that the day our daughter, who is our second child, the day she moves to college, we're moving straight back to the city. But yeah, so started writing, been writing, had our first child, a son, almost 4 years ago. He'll be 4 in 2 weeks. And then had our second child, a daughter, 6 months ago yesterday, had a miscarriage in there. We've gone through the whole thing. So, and now, yeah, here we are. And I have recently started a Substack newsletter. I don't want to say the name, but Bryan can link to it in the description, because the name does include the expletive, if you ask me. But it's about how difficult being a dad is. And it's not really service journalism. It's not really how-to. It's just stories. I'm a writer. I'm an essayist. Excuse me. I make my living writing. However, I do a lot of news stories, but at my core, I'm an essay writer. And so that's kind of what the newsletter is. It's the subhead of the newsletter is dispatches from the trenches of modern parenthood. So it's not really, it's just first person stories of the stuff that I go through every day and every week with my wife and my kids. And it's a place where fathers and mothers, the cool thing about my newsletter is that it's almost a 50-50 split with our subscribers, male and female. And it's just, people who read it and say, you know what, that I remember that, someone like Bryan, who maybe has kids who are a bit older, or someone who is thinking of having kids. Oh, okay, that's kind of what I can expect, and I want to highlight the good along with the bad, because as so many new parents know, expectant parents, the horror stories are what we always hear, the terrible labors, the kids who won't sleep through the night. And there is a lot of that in my newsletter. But also I want to talk about the good stuff, because so often we revert to telling our horror stories. I don't know why that is. It's human nature, but I want to, and I want to say, hey, there's a lot of hard stuff. There's a lot of it's the hardest thing I've ever done, being a parent, but at the same time, it's the most amazing and coolest thing I've ever done. So just kind of put a positive spin on it. Also, when my wife was pregnant with our son, again, as a reader and a writer, my first instinct is always to go to books. And when my wife was pregnant, I was looking for books, and everything geared towards fathers was very self-help, how-to, or humor. There's a real lack of earnest literature, and I think that says a lot about men, masculinity, etc., that we're not allowed to talk about heavy feelings. We have to wrap everything up in a joke, which is fine. There's a place for that. But I was looking for a book that was earnest and emotional and honest and beautiful. And that was really hard to find. And so I just, coming from a kind of a punk rock, DIY, indie rock background, my first instinct is also always, if you don't see something in the world, then just go make it. So that's kind of the birth of the newsletter.
That's awesome. Now I wanted to ask you, you think this is something that will turn into, maybe a book?
I hope so. I don't know if sorry, I'm just asking. So we are all getting over COVID, and my throat is a little jacked up, and I did not bring any water. I just texted my wife to ask her for some. I would like to someday. I don't know if this format as it is translates into a book, which is the case with a lot of blogs and newsletters, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I would. My goal is to write a book about my experiences as a father. I have a project I'm working on now that's kind of like, both my wife and myself, we lost our mothers when we were relatively young. I was 30, and she doesn't want to be on camera because, again, we've been locked down for 10 days, and we're all looking quite worse for the wear. We both lost our mothers when we were relatively young. I was 30 and my wife was in her early 20s. And we've done a lot without moms. We got married, we courted our entire relationship, we got married, we bought a house, we've moved, we've started careers from scratch. And then most importantly, like we had kids without our moms, and our dads are great and our children's grandfathers are great, but there's a major void in our lives where the grandmothers should be. And so one project I am working on is kind of a guide to life. So the idea is that idea of mortality has always weighed heavily on me as a father, especially once my kids started coming. And so, I'm writing a guide to life for them. Hey, what if I close this Zoom call and get hit by a bus? Here's what it means for me to be a person in the world, a good person, a good citizen, a good husband, a good father. But obviously that would just be a letter to my kids. This is more of a kind of a universal approach to it that other parents can read and find something to resonate with.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes sense. And, it's something that I'm actually working on myself as a book. And I agree with you. I didn't want it so much of a how-to. I'm kind of trying to base it off stories that I've went through as a dad. And it's one of the points of my show is to kind of not so much to hear how-tos from dads, but to hear how they are handling various situations, how they're handling the bonds with their kids, how they're handling, sharing love with their kids and all that kind of stuff, to hopefully encourage dads that may be going through something that goes, hey, I'm kind of going through that same thing. That's a great way of reconnecting with my child, So that was kind of the point of my show. My boys, you and I have just gotten a chance to meet, but my boys are, they're grown men. They're 23 and 20. So I've been, I don't like to call myself, an expert at parenting, but I will say that I'm an expert dad because I've been around for such a long time with my boys. I've seen a lot of the things that parents, the normal parents, the normal things that parents go through, and just kind of how to navigate through that. And it was a struggle for me. It still is a struggle today. There's still things that I'm dealing with today as a dad, even though my boys are, they're grown, and my younger son's away in college, playing college basketball. My older son has a phenomenal job at a corporate in corporate, working in sales, and absolutely loves it. He's very successful. He's saving money right now, so he's still home, but he's saving money so he can move out and buy his own house. And he's only 23. So for him to be going through those things right now is remarkable for him. But so I still have this connection and this bond, and I still share things with my boys. They're my best friends. And I hear a lot of parents say, you really shouldn't be your child's friend. I completely disagree with that. I've been both my boys' friends their whole lives. And right now, as grown men, they're two of my best friends. So it's just a really cool connection that we have. And I wanted to find a way to share that with others and hear others' experiences as well. So you being a new dad, I want to kind of get into your fatherhood role, but I want to talk about something really quick because, freelance writing has always been something that's been, something that I've thought about. My wife's a phenomenal writer. She's a teacher, an English teacher. So she knows all about, I have her read a lot of my stuff that I write. So to kind of critique it. But what was the main reason for getting into freelance writing? Because that is a tough industry to get into. And it's a tough industry to really, because there's so many of them. Why was that the choice that you made?
It was a skill that I had. It was to put food on the table. No other reason. It was truly meant as a stopgap from the end of my band to whatever was next for me, whether it was getting back into the record business, going back to the record label world, or doing something else. I don't know what it was, but it was a skill that I've had since my mother was a great writer, beautiful writer. Much like your wife, she was an English teacher and then a special education teacher, but wrote on her own time, and always had these dreams. She used to write for the Gramercy Park Herald when she was in college in New York City, and her dream was to become a journalist, and she actually kind of backburnered that dream. She had gotten accepted into Columbia's MFA program, which is obviously one of the best in the world. And my father decided to go to medical school, and she said, I forget that. I'm going to come to support you in medical school. He wanted her to go to Columbia. She was like, no, dude, Columbia will always be there. Of course, then they started having my sister and then myself. So she never got back to it, but she always wrote, always taught me how to write. I'd never taken a writing class. I took one intro to writing freshman year of college, but everything I learned from her and then learned from doing. So me getting into this was purely necessity. Not unlike a welder who, that's his skill, or a carpenter or a plumber. That's just my skill is writing and telling stories. So when I was in a place where, holy crap, how do I make a living to support, help my wife, to support our family? It was the one thing that I knew I could do other than waiting tables, which I did all throughout high school and college. And I'm never doing again, because public school all teachers and service people are we need to pay them a whole lot more money because they're the absolute backbones. So yeah, getting into it was pure necessity. It was purely, I need to make money right now. I don't want to go work in a restaurant. How do I do that? And so I just started figuring out as I go, Googling, how do I sell stories? How do I write a pitch? Finding local places. I started writing for, those local lifestyle magazines where there are more ads for dentists than there is actual copy. Right. And then, like I said, things just started snowballing. And within a year, I think, or maybe 18 months, I was contributing to the New York Times, and in nationally known magazines. And since I've written for tons of different, national, international places. And so yeah, it was totally like, I have kids, I need to make money. What do I do? And that was it. I don't have any other marketable skills other than. selling records and playing the guitar.
I can see that by all the guitars in the back there. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's just a couple of them.
Well, awesome. Now, let me ask you this. I mean, you got two young kids. How's their health, by the way? I know you said you guys all kind of had COVID, so they're all good.
Yeah, luckily there was one night. Each of them were sick for one night, and it's scary because they were, they're under 5, so they can't be vaccinated. And, our son, our daughter, we know had a little bit of what my wife had because she's still breastfeeding. She's 6 months old, and our son just has a mask and good judgment, and he's in school, and that's all he has for protection. And it was scary. But when he got sick, he brought it home. It was fine. It was fine. I'm so thankful that it was fine. But everyone was sick for one night each, but then we were stuck at home because they were still testing positive. Yeah. But thankfully everybody's okay.
Well, I'm glad everybody's okay. I did want to ask you this though, when we're kind of getting into, you as essentially a new dad, and you've started to produce this newsletter, through your own research, through your own writings. What have you learned about parenting that, maybe you go, what, I'm sitting here writing stories about, my parenting lifestyle, but doing my research and stuff, I'm learning so much. What, give me an idea of what you're learning that you may incorporate as a parent.
Well, the very first thing that comes to mind, and it's weird that I kind of make this connection to my own father because my father's a doctor. He's retired, and one thing he always told me when I remember when I was a kid, I was embarrassed about, I forget what was happening with me, but I had to go to the doctor and I was embarrassed about it. And my father told me, he's like, listen, the worst thing you could imagine telling your doctor sees every single day and has seen 100,000 times over the course of his career. So when you go into the doctor and you're all embarrassed about talking about whatever, it's the doctor's like, yeah, okay, you're having diarrhea. It's not a big deal. We deal with that, whatever it was. And that's one thing that when you say that, that's the thing I think about, is that in doing this newsletter and in interacting with parents and readers and subscribers, that sure, your child is unique and special and a special snowflake, because because all people are unique and special snowflakes in the world. And I very much believe that. But at the same time, there's nothing special about our stories. Everyone has, that's the thing I realized, is that whatever is happening to us is happening to so many other people. And parenting, as you know, especially in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. when the baby won't stop crying, it's a very lonely endeavor. And, sometimes, you have your wife or your husband or your partner, but a lot of times you don't. A lot of times you're by yourself. And so, writing this and it's just realizing that it's made me feel a lot less alone, and another thing that's been weird, my wife and I were kind of on the New York City schedule of, we got married when we were 30, after post 30, we had kids after the age of 35. And then we moved out of North Carolina, where everyone our age had kids much earlier. Just because people in New York are so career driven, career focused, as we were. We didn't have a place in our life for kids before the age of 30, So in a way that's kind of made us feel even more alone, because we've had a difficult time finding people who are our age, who have kids our age. Most of the people who have kids our age are 10 years younger than us. But knowing that, everything we go through is just not in any way unique. It's everybody goes through it. And just kind of, my wife does a lot more of she reads a lot of, research data, doctors, scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists. So she's the one who's kind of always bringing to the table different methodologies of dealing with our frustrations or our anger with our kids, or, whatever. So I learn a ton from her. But really just the idea that my experiences as a father are hardly unique. They're just so common, even though it may seem like at the time I'm the only person in the world that I'm struggling to keep my head above water. Just knowing that makes so much of it so much easier.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, I was like so many other parents that, my wife and I had kids when we were, in our early 20s. And, even though I already had a career, my wife already had a career. It was, my kids are, I'm going on 50 now. My kids are, grown. So,
see, and I'm going on 40 and I'm just getting started.
Right. So
I got a long road ahead of me, but
yeah. Well, hearing stories from other men, regardless of the age of the kids, just the fact, even if they have older kids, it's kind of what I was talking about before with my show, is that, even though may have met somebody that has older kids, they know what it's like to go through those times when their kids were younger, and just getting advice and suggestions from them on how to handle things, because your kids are going to go through a lot of changes, a lot of challenges, especially, your son's in school now. There's going to be various obstacles that come up in his way that you may not know how to handle, maybe personally, things that you may have gone through as a child. But just speaking with some of those dads that have older kids that, hey, my son went through the same thing, or my daughter went through the same thing. This is how we handled it. So even though the real friendship connection may not quite be there because you feel so much older than these other people, the fact is they may have gone through things that you may be going through there. So there may be a deeper connection there that you're really aware of. And I would encourage you to, try to reach out to some of those people and become friends. So that way, if there's ever things that you need from a parenting perspective, they might be the ones to go to. So just a thought.
Yeah, it's also been extra hard because we're trying to raise two kids during a pandemic that, now, and then in that little beautiful little sweet spot between Delta and Omicron, we were able to get out. We were able to be, sure, masked and safe and whatever, but we were out with other parents at the playground, whatever. But so much, we, for one example, we've gone way overboard with toys. And my wife and I have had this discussion a lot. It's like, are we spoiling him? It's like, yeah, we kind of are. But at the same time, he's 4 years old in 2 weeks. He's lived more than half of his life in a pandemic, where much of that time he's been locked at home with me and my wife, and that's it. Right. And so, yeah, if a Matchbox car every other day makes him happy, then, so, and are we going to have to unravel that in very soon in the next year and help him realize that he doesn't get a toy every day now that the world is starting to hopefully open back up? Yeah, but whatever. If it helped him survive and thrive in the last 2 years, then,
I love that you said that, because it's something that, back when this pandemic really started, I've talked to several dads, I've coached dads. And one of the things that I've told them is they say, Bryan, look, I know we're going through this pandemic, but I can't get my son to do anything. All he wants to do is play video games. I try to get him to work on his homework and all that kind of stuff, but he just is so consumed in the video games. It's hard to get him off of them. And I try to tell them, look, it's something that they're going through a time right now that they've never experienced. And to be quite frank, we've never experienced, right? So they're going through a tough time. They're having to navigate and learn things on their own, stuck at home. Instead of harping on them about being on the video games, why not jump on the video game with them and play with them? Because not only are you allowing them to just kind of enjoy themselves, but you're also building a bond and a connection between the two of you. So I've shared that with dads, and they thought, I never thought about it like that. So like you said, with your son, he's been stuck at home for over half his life. And he's really not quite sure how to navigate socially just yet, because he's just now starting to get out there. But if a Matchbox car makes him happy, or if he's wants to learn the guitar like dad, get down on the floor and play Matchbox with him, or play the guitar with him, teach him guitar, how to play guitar. Those kind of things are what will make him happy, but at the same time will help build a connection and a bond between the two of you. So I don't have.
Also, I think that a lot of young parents, or parents in general, people in general, because we tend to not recognize our own nostalgia or whatever, but they don't realize that and a lot of people I've encountered too, this whole pandemic notwithstanding, any kid who's been born after the year 2000, they've been born into a country that's been, and I'm not going to get political, don't worry, but they've been born into a country that's been at war the entire time. They've been, the last, again, wherever you fall on the political spectrum, the last 6 years politically have been just bonkers crazy. So like their world, they didn't grow up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s like you and I did. I was born in 1982, and until I went to college, until September 11th, 2001, when I was a freshman in college, everything was more or less, and again, recognizing that I'm coming from a middle class white male's perspective, but everything was pretty much cool. Everybody, we were prosperous, and there was no, other than Desert Storm, like there were no, there was no tumult. And then after that, it's just been so, like you said, like to give your kids, like to recognize that, like, they're in this world that we weren't in when we were kids, and the reaction to it is going to be different than what we may expect, because we didn't grow up in a country that was at war for that our whole lives.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know what? I I do not want to be in your shoes with young kids during a pandemic. The fact that, my kids are older, obviously much easier to navigate with older kids. But I think about the parents that are going through struggles right now with younger kids that don't quite understand, or, like even a 5, 6, 7, 8-year old that are so used to being around friends at school and things like that. And now all of a sudden that's changed. However, I do think that there's a hidden message in all of this, whatever you want to call it, pandemania, whatever you want to call it, that we're going through, that's kind of opened up a new way of communicating with people, like Zoom, and other features that, people are starting to utilize more to help people connect. And I think it's a great opportunity for kids to kind of learn, because technology is moving so fast. I think it's a great opportunity for kids to really learn how to navigate and socialize with people that they may not normally socialize with, like you being across the states from me. We've gotten a chance to know each other just through technology. So I think that's kind of, that's kind of the hidden gem in all of this, is it's allowed people to really connect, even though we're not outside connecting. I do think the social interaction, the face-to-face interaction is much more important. However, when you have to kind of figure out how to navigate through it, when you can't do that, technology's certainly come a long ways and will continue to expand. So I think I actually think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, my 6-month-old, my father lives in town now. He moved down from New York as well, but my 6-month-old, she FaceTimes with him. I mean, when she doesn't know what she's looking at, but she knows that's grandpa, and how did he get in that little box? But whatever. I mean, she'll soon enough. And no, it is. I agree. I mean, and what I look forward to is the point where some of that paradigm shifts, and where I begin to learn from my children. I have a friend, a very close friend, whose daughter has older kids. His daughter's a freshman in college. His son is I shouldn't just say his wife is also a dear friend. Their daughter's a freshman in college. Their son is a senior in high school. And I love learning from their kids. I love learning about new music. I love learning about, I'm not going to run around talking about, I'm not going to, be, embracing their vernacular and saying the things that 19-year-olds say. That'd be ridiculous. But like, I enjoy, I mean, I love learning about new music. I love hearing new music that I don't understand, because I think that if you make music that the generations before you like, then you're doing it wrong. But I don't get what this music is supposed to be, but these kids love it. And I think that's so cool. So I can't wait for that time. But also I have to temper that with, don't look too far ahead, because you'll miss what's right in front of you.
Right. Exactly. Let me ask you, I'll ask you one more question, then we'll get going.
Yeah.
What have you, I know that your mom passed when, if I remember correctly, was it cancer?
Yeah. She had ovarian cancer. She lived for a
Okay.
long time with it, but eventually passed. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But what, growing up, what did you learn from your parents that you hope to transition into your own parenting style?
That children are, it sounds dumb, but it's very true, that children are not children. They're small people.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to consider and regard that truth in everything they do. Just because they don't have the knowledge, the wisdom, to be autonomous, they don't have the tools, that, we never spoke to our children like babies. And I'm not saying that I don't advocate for that. Talk to your kids however you want to. But from a very young age, I've always spoken to my son, and I explained things. He asked us recently, like, what happened to Grandma Susie and Grandma Carol, And we explained to him death, and he said, when you die, people don't love you anymore. No, that's not true. But he's a person, and my parents gave me a lot of credit, and my sister a lot of credit, and with how much we could understand and how much we could kind of digest and ingest. And they had a lot of, we never had the talk, because my mother explained sex to us at a very young age, in very frank terms and very real terms, and I was able to understand it. And so that's one big thing. The other big thing is that and again, we don't think of ourselves as just grown children. We think of ourselves as adults and they're children. We have the same emotions and the same feelings that our children are having. We just have the tools to deal with them. They don't. Right. And that's one thing I learned from, big thing I learned from my parents was, to never belittle a child's feelings, because you're having the exact same feelings, but you've developed mechanisms consciously and subconsciously to not have a tantrum, which you end up face down on the floor. They don't have those tools yet, but they're feeling the same things that you're feeling. So it's just the idea of, respecting them as human beings, not respecting them because they're, or just treating them like they're your children. Right. Now, of course, there is a balance of power. I'm the parent, as you said, you're your kid's best friends. And my father is one of my closest friends. And before she passed, my mother was one of my closest friends. But one thing my father used to say and I love, it's one of my favorite parenting quotes of all time. When I was a kid, I'd be like, how come you're not cool like so-and-so's dad? His dad lets us drink in the basement. And my dad would say, I'll be your friend when you're 30. Until then, I'm your father. And my father and I always had a very close, very friend relationship. But until I was in my mid-20s, I would say, until I was out of college, let's say, it was very clear that I'm in charge here. Like, you're my son. I'm responsible for you. We could be friends when you're an adult, but right now. So, but just, that idea that, we need to give our kids and little people in general more credit for being, human beings and having opinions and thoughts and not belittling them because they're 3 years old. Not belittle, that's not the right word, but to not discount them because they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the fact that I've heard some dads call them little adults. They just don't have the tools to really learn how to navigate and make choices for themselves. So I think that's great. Awesome. Very cool. I want to do this. I want to give you a chance to let my listeners know where they can find you, where they can learn about the newsletter, and then obviously the best way to reach out to you on social media.
Yeah. So all my social media handles, Instagram, Twitter, I don't do Facebook publicly really, are at Christ Glider. Christ like Jesus, glider like a hang glider. It's not a religious thing. I'm very much deeply not a religious person. It's a long-standing inside joke with some old friends. At Christ Glider. So that's Twitter, Instagram, and you could find it on the newsletters on Substack. It's Being a Dad is Hard as F *CK. Because that's a very true statement. So if you just Google, Being a Dad is Hard as F *CK, you'll find it with my name. And that's the Substack. You subscribe. You could read them all if you like. Subscribe. There's no paid option yet. It's all free right now. Someday I'd like to maybe embrace a paid thing where I interview famous dads or something. But for right now, it comes every Wednesday. It's very short, 500, 600, 700 words. You're not reading tomes. I know people's attention spans are clogged. So, but yeah, follow me at Christ Glider and subscribe to the newsletter on Substack.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put all those, all the tags in the posts and all that. So very cool. Well, listen, Michael, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you very much for being on the show. Appreciate it. I look forward to continuing our friendship moving forward.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate all you're doing for dads everywhere. And best of luck to you. Really, really, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much for joining me and Michael on another episode of Dad Up. Make sure you guys, if you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribing to my show, subscribing to my YouTube channel, and I'll make sure to put all the links up there for Michael. But make sure you guys are continuing to watch and support Dad Up podcast. It's out there to really help dads and help moms too become better parents, because our kids deserve it. So I look forward to seeing you all again on the next episode of Dad Up. Thanks for listening to another episode of Dad Up. Make sure you guys subscribe to my podcast and my YouTube channel. And do me a favor, leave me a rating and a review. Would love to hear from you to see what you think of the show. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes coming up each and every week. Thank you for listening. This is Dad Up.